All right, everybody, welcome to the KubeVirt community meeting. This is February 27th, 2019. We have an agenda and notes that is still in flux, but we can get started. First topic is from Peter Kodist, speaking on VM snapshots.
So finding the unmute, and hopefully I can be heard. Yeah. So I finalized, finally the discussion in the mailing list went to some conclusions. So I've been able to summarize them in the design doc, which is linked in the notes. Please feel free to comment and provide a feedback. Basically what we agreed is that there will have to be a high-level controller. There is still an open question how to implement that. And the quick choice is implement custom controller or have it as a Kubernetes job. The discussion is in the document. And still open question is what is the result we will provide, where we will store the result of snapshots. There are three options: either create new virtual machine, annotated as a result, or create a template annotated as a result, or create custom resource, which will be a result of virtual machine snapshot. Again, the discussion for this is in the document, so feel free to provide feedback. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Sure thing. You went over the different ways to store kind of fast. I was trying to summarize for you. Could you repeat those?
Yeah, there are, technically speaking, there are three ways to store the result of virtual machine snapshot. First one is to create a new virtual machine that will be annotated as a result. It has its downsides because one of the requirements for snapshots is that it cannot be runnable. Basically, there has to be no way to run by option the snapshot. Second one is a template. Create a template which will be annotated as a snapshot. Again, this is not runnable, but it's editable, and it has to be heavily annotated to comprise the information that it is a snapshot and to point to the all relevant information. And the third option is a custom resource, for instance, virtual machine snapshot result, which will store everything in one place and solves all the issues. It's not runnable, it's not editable, it stores the result, it links to the volume snapshot, it links to the copy of virtual machine spec. It requires a little bit more work, but it solves all the issues. The discussion for that is in the document.
So question for you, as far as the template, you mentioned that it's editable. Would we be able to control that with RBAC rules to prevent it being messed with?
Well, not because templates are editable by default. You want to edit the templates.
I wanted to ask a question about how you request a snapshot to virtual machine snapshot to be created in the first place. Maybe it's in the doc, but we're having a little bit of a discussion here. So I assume that in order to be declarative, you would need to post something to the cluster to request it, which I would suggest might be a virtual machine snapshot object that you would post, and then perhaps the actual status of that object is the result of your request, which would seem to be a pretty normal pattern.
That's correct. And regarding the actual volume snapshot, I imagine I can just create a volume snapshot in Kubernetes API, and then the underlying storage would just kick in and create a clone of the disk.
Right, so that should be done, but that should probably be managed by the virtual machine snapshot controller, which would automatically determine which components are a part of the snapshot based on the spec of the virtual machine snapshot object. So selecting the disks, triggering those snapshots all together, making sure they complete within a reasonable time window, that sort of stuff.
And that is correct.
Yeah, so. Anyway, the right way to go for this seems pretty clear to me. I'll express that in the document.
Great, thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Any other questions before we move on to storage? All right, fair enough. Storage update.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to jump on and kind of talk about a couple of things that we're doing over in really in the containerized data importer land, and but with some touch points to KubeVirt. So one of the things, you know, the discussion that we just had around virtual machine snapshots, some of these more advanced features start to require storage that actually has more capabilities than something like the local storage provider is going to be able to supply. So if we want to have reliable functional tests for these features that we're adding, it's going to be necessary to pull in more capable storage. Ceph is a really great candidate for this because it's, you know, it's freely available. There are containerized deployments of it that run on top of Kubernetes clusters. And it also happens to have all the features that we're looking for to enable, you know, more complex virtualization flows like snapshots and cloning. So one of the things that our team is looking at doing is coming up with a basically a storage deployment of Ceph that can be incorporated into KubeVirt CI, so that basically when you do a make cluster up, you would have a storage class that's served by a Ceph CSI provisioner and everything ready to go out of the box. So we're looking to do that. We would appreciate, you know, help in terms of best practices and attention to any PRs that come out. At this point, we're just still working on pulling it all together. So that's the first one. I guess I can just see if there's any comments on that before I go on to the next item. Okay, so the next one is in CDI. So KubeVirt's already supporting block PVs for running virtual machines disks. We are looking to enable the flows in CDI to import, clone, and upload to those devices, to those block devices, to really complete that block PV story across, you know, creating and provisioning virtual machines. So that work is ongoing. At some point, we're going to be, you know, wanting KubeVirt to update to newer versions of CDI as we release this functionality. So that's coming up. And then finally, the last update that I would share is around the upload ingress. So the way that CDI upload works is that the cluster has an ingress where the outside user is uploading data to. In the past, that has had to be, it's basically like a magic string that you kind of need to know how to get yourself. We are adding a new CDI config map that is going to actually supply for you the proper URL that you need to use based on if the deployment has a route already configured and properly labeled. So this is going to make it easy for tools like virtctl upload to automatically determine the ingress if it's available in the cluster, to make that an optional parameter. So we'll be looking for some PRs from us to complete that story as well. So those are just kind of the three things I wanted to talk about. I don't know if there's any other questions for me from storage or anything on these items.
Awesome. Sounds like that. Thank you so much. That's great.
Sure. Yep.
Next up, networking, SRIOV.
Hey, I won't go into all this stuff. I will just touch on CI. So the PR is still not merged, obviously. We made some progress. Like had some issues with particular NICs. It turns out that some of the NICs, when they create VFs, their MAC addresses are zeroed, and so we need to deal with that. But anyway, it's behind us. So I have some questions about the deployment of CI. So in the past, when I was working with Daniel Belenki on some of this stuff, most of the work was happening in our CI scripts that are triggered inside CI pods. But some of the work, some of the fixes belonged to some external thing that actually creates the CI pods. So now I started to hit some of the issues in the latest PR runs that seems to be like what we already saw before and what was solved by fixes in this external thing. I don't know. First, like my questions are first, I don't really know where the code to actually create these CI pods live, and I would like to know to see what are the like the actual code for the fixes was, and not just description of it. And second, I would like to know, is it deployed automatically to all the nodes, all the fixes that go there, or there's a chance that a fix was applied to one of the CI nodes, but not to another one. So now I see some of the failures because that's what happened. Perhaps someone knows about how CI pods are created or where to look for the code.
Sadly, I think we have no one here from the CI team, so I don't think anyone can answer that. So just to rephrase what you said, your issue is that you do something, so you modify something which requires you to execute the job on the right node, and you now don't know if your scripts are executed on the right node or on the wrong, and the scripts just fail for whatever reason, or if you're on the wrong nodes altogether.
I don't think the scheduler picks a wrong node. I just don't know whether the fixes that were needed in the past to make the scripts make progress like further that we definitely had, because I saw some of the runs before that were past these errors. So, and we discussed the fixes with Daniel at some point.
Could you ping on the pull request Daniel Belinki and Barak? Or
okay,
or
I
write
can
them an
put
email
them
or
there.
something?
I dropped some emails, couldn't get a reply, so suppose that maybe they are here, but apparently not. But yeah, I need to chase that. I'm kind of blocked, even though though we have a lot of progress, but I cannot really like validate that now for some reason. Okay, I will chase Daniel as I did, and also add Barak.
By the way, yeah, the test now passed, the SRLB test.
Okay. Perhaps someone retriggered it and I haven't noticed it.
Yeah, I retriggered it. There was a problem with the Docker that is a known issue that happened from some time. The CI guys tell me that. But about the SRLB, so right now we have only two nodes that are running the SRLB. One is with an Intel car and the other one is with a Broadcom car.
Yeah.
That's it. We just have only two nodes that are available for the SRLB. For all RCI, we have a lot of other nodes.
Okay, so yes, indeed. So there was this Docker issue, and it was at some point fixed, and then reappeared. And now you're telling me that it actually passed. So I wonder whether it's whether it was like, do we need to care about the fact that it failed in the past? Is it some intermittent error, or it?
So right now I would like to ask Daniel in the PR if he can try to run our lane on both nodes, in the Intel one and in the Broadcom one, to see that the lane pass in both nodes,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it will be good after that.
Okay, yeah, we need to make sure that we're not just happen to land on a different.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but that's good that we've passed it. So okay, so we have a PR that actually passes at least once in a while. So that's good. And another thing that is related, unrelated. So we Daniel wrote some CNI, which is really just a bash script that is called once per SRIV CI pod. By CI, like CI cluster, not the cluster that is under the test. It is triggered for SRIV CI pods to move netting devices from bare metal into the CI pods. So we have this repo, but it's not under. Well, first, this code is used only in KubeVirt CI, and second, it's not under KubeVirt organization. I was thinking maybe we should move that repo under KubeVirt since it's kind of part of our CI now.
So, but it's so yeah. I mean, if there is something in there, probably KubeVirt CI would still be the best place, even if you're not using the nested clusters, I guess. So that we have all that stuff together and not fragmented too much. Does that sound reasonable?
You mean a repo named KubeVirt CI, right?
We have a repo named KubeVirt CI where we have all our test clusters and where we build test images and that kind of stuff. I guess that's a good place for such a script too, although you're not using the nested KubeVirt clusters.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying, I would instead of like moving the repo, I would move the code, and then just make sure that the automation for CI also builds the image for the CI.
I guess that makes most sense. Otherwise, we have everything so much fragmented, and it will be very hard to find all the pieces. My first thought would be my first thought, but I haven't seen the code. What you're trying to add?
Yeah, it's really small. It's like one shell script and the Docker file and stuff like that. I'm not necessarily like in agreement that this is the best way to just lump everything in the same thing, but I can live with it.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just if it's in different places, then you have to go to a lot of different repos, synchronize everything that is ready in some. I don't know.
But the thing is, it's not like related to anything that KubeVirt CI actually like executes or runs or produces. It's what we deploy on our CI.
Yeah, but all I mean is we do not just have the KubeVirt CI class, the CI clusters in there. We have other stuff there too. For instance, the test images. So it's, I don't know. It's in Kubernetes they are going even farther. They're developing their whole CI system in one repo, having all the base containers in there and so on.
Yeah, I see where it comes from. It's monorepo culture.
Yeah. I don't mind too much.
We
just need to make it visible and
but
change it by the right people.
My main point, like let's move it to under control.
Sounds good.
No disagreement with this.
Okay, sounds like we covered a lot of ground there. Are there any questions about that? Any of the topics we covered there? All right, moving on to Istio. Sebastian.
Yeah, so this is the last part that we need to integrate Istio with the Masquerade and make a production-ready solution for that. I would like if someone can comment there. David already started to do it, and also ER. It's a very small PR. The only thing there that is, let's say, a change for us is when you use Istio, it will attach another container that is called the Istio proxy. And the Istio proxy will not be in ready state until you have a service that is part of the service mesh. So our main problem there was the Virt controller doesn't start the VM because it's waiting for all the containers to be ready. So this is the main change I made to just keep, if you find the container that its name is Istio proxy, don't check if it's ready or not to start the VM.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? And next up, talking about the Windows MTU, Sebastian again.
Yeah, so like 1 month ago, I made a PR to add to the DOM XML the MTU value and not only use it on the DHCP options that we are using because Windows can't read it. So now the next part I need is to update our Windows driver that we are providing to the latest one and not to the stable, because the stable doesn't support to read the MTU from the driver. So this is my next step. I'm going to open a PR about it to change from stable to latest.
Awesome, thank you. And moving on to Martin, how to deal with hardware-dependent pod spec versus abstract VM.
Right. So I thought that Roman is before me.
I want to talk about Romans last. Sorry, I moved it.
Just go on. Just
Okay.
go on.
Okay. So yeah, basically there are two things I want to discuss right now. First, we have issues with Windows and Hyper-V. There are certain Hyper-V features that can only be enabled when the host kernel, libvirt version, and QEMU version align properly. And we control all of that except host kernel. So obviously when you create a VM and ask for the feature, you don't know whether the host kernel will support it or not. And if you ask for Cynic, for example, and the host kernel is not good enough, the VM will not start, which is not an outcome we want. So we need to find a way how to deal with this on the execution, at the execution time, because you can't tell before you schedule the pod. And the other thing is you could depend on it in the scheduler, but you don't really know if this feature is going to be available in the cluster at all. And it might not be important enough for you. So it might be a case of use it if it's available, otherwise ignore it. There's no mechanism to do that right now. Yeah,
So
so
the
if
point
anybody
here
has
was to,
anybody has any idea how to deal with this, would be great.
Perhaps this might be a better topic for the mailing list because it's going to require some thought.
Yeah, Francesco is going to send one. He might have already done that. I haven't checked. But I just thought that I would give you a heads up.
Okay, well, thank you. Next topic is you again,
Mine
cluster-wide
as well.
configuration.
Yeah. We recently hit an issue with what seemed to be a very simple fix. We just wanted to add a field to the config map, and that was about the default CPU model. Because right now the hard-coded default is host model. When you install CNV, meaning all the layered products, as an admin, you might want to say that all my VMs that are started without explicit CPU model will be Westmere compatible, things like that. That's important for heterogeneous clusters. So, even if you remove node, add node, you will still keep live migration capabilities. Nobody had to think about it till now because live migration was never fully working and supported. But now, since we are getting close to having live migration actually supported, we might need this. The couple of things we hit were that first, David was opposed to adding it to the config map. Second, the UI team that might want to use the default information in the UI, so they will properly give you the right options. They can't read the config map because it's in wrong namespace and they don't have access to it. And then we have the operator that's supposed to deploy KubeVirt, and I was really wondering, it's probably good material for mailing list as well, but I was wondering if anybody thought about, cluster and not just KubeVirt or node. Roman and David, I think both of you are here, right? So
Yeah, I'm here. Sadly, I didn't follow that pull request too closely, so I don't know the latest state there. That was.
It's still not merged. That's all that matters to me. But
Yeah,
Here.
but I don't have much feedback there. Maybe David.
Here are my thoughts. So this this option impacts a variable within our API, and what I'm concerned is what's special about CPU model? Are we going to have other options that need this kind of global default for VMIs, or is this a one-off thing? So if it turns out this is a pattern and we need the ability to express lots of defaults that take place cluster-wide across lots of namespaces, then I think it would be wise for us to go ahead and adopt something like a global preset or something like that we can set and it gets applied everywhere. Because if we start doing these one-off things, the thing I'm concerned about is as our API evolves, then what happens with we're mapping things in a config map to a versioned API, and as that version API changes, what happens with the things that were mapped get deprecated? We have no translation between how somebody sets a default and how that actually makes it into our API.
Okay, so I think I have an answer to that. So I have some experience in KubeVirt. I've been there for, I don't know, 6 years maybe. So there are a couple more options that are cluster-wide, but none of them would be fit for KubeVirt because they were mostly resource management related in terms of memory ballooning and stuff, and that's not something KubeVirt cares about. So CPU model and the compatibility of those of the VM is probably the only thing KubeVirt cares about. Everything else is probably somebody else's job. It might be mine, but not in KubeVirt context. So
just a short question here: why not memory ballooning?
Well, you don't really care about it, right? You don't care about the rules. It's never. The management is not going to be part of KubeVirt core. It's basically an additional component that might run.
Okay, so you
alongside.
think we would just enable memory ballooning or not? But
yeah, you will just add a device, but you will not control the actual resources because that's node level. You need to take a look at all the VMs, but that's a different discussion.
Okay.
It's like, yeah, I think KubeVirt should just enable the device on the VM side. The same with KSM, maybe just flag the VM somehow, but shouldn't do the actual resource rebalancing by itself. With CPU model, that's hard because the CPU model of the VM XML has to match the pod specification. So KubeVirt is the right place to do that. And the default has to get there somehow. Global, what was that? David, you said it. I just lost the word.
Global preset.
Yeah, global presets would work possibly. It's just that right now they would be used for single feature only, and I see pretty big risk in implementing them. I mean, it's going to be pretty involved.
It could be overkill if it's not got a clear use case beyond this one feature, and that's what I'm trying to tease out. If we're pretty confident that it's just going to be CPU model, I think I'd feel more comfortable with it being in that config map. If we eventually down the line see that it's going to be used for more, I would hate for us to keep using that precedence that we set by adding it to the config map and instead move to something like a global preset for the future.
Right now,
when you say global preset, you mean the actual preset mechanism we have right now where you can...
it's something new. It's something
but why not? Because this current preset model could actually mandate, hey, use this CPU model, and then you would use the CPU override mechanism for anybody that actually cared.
Yeah, Stu, I was actually, we were discussing this. At least I was taking a look at it. It was one of the options. The thing is, the preset right now, if you define something in there and then you change it in the VM, it will throw warnings, which is not nice to the user. I mean, he will get a warning every time he tries to start a VM with explicit CPU model. It will tell you that the preset couldn't be applied as a whole because there was something already specified in the VM. And that's just cosmetic, but I know some of our customers and they get itchy when they see something like that.
Well, that's fine. There shouldn't actually be a warning for overrides because that is exactly the mechanism we put in place.
Yeah, the documentation says that you will get a warning.
Let's revisit that. I'm not sure that's true.
Yeah, the second thing is there's no way to apply presets to everything. You have to have some label. You have to explicitly match.
You can actually apply to everything.
Really?
Across namespace is what we're talking about as well.
Yeah.
Fair. That's true.
Actually, sorry for jumping in this, Fabian. Actually, one thing I wondered is, as we discussed the preset mechanism, if migrations today are bound to namespace. So I understand that in KubeVirt, for example, we have a cluster default for the CPU model. I wonder, but oh yeah, and I wonder if for KubeVirt it makes sense to actually have that. I mean, I would put it out as a question. If it makes sense to have a namespace default. Because why? We could think about the reason. I mean, the reason why I thought of it right now is because migrations are also only taking place within a namespace. And if we think that a namespace is a soft boundary for a tenant, right, or for a project, then we could say it might even make sense to have that, to have this default for the CPU model per namespace.
Yeah, Fabian, I have a couple of counterexamples. First, I will want to revisit the presets by themselves. The issue with current presets that was never solved is that there is no clear ordering. So if you have multiple, you don't know which is going to be applied first. And now to Fabian's things, it might work, except nodes are not namespaced. So you get the same nodes for every namespace. Second, if you it would require that somebody creates this default for every new namespace created. So the operator or somebody would have to watch namespaces and create some kind of a default, which might be tricky. I mean, it would require everybody to set their default. They would have to know about it, and it wouldn't be default anymore. It would be configuration per namespace. And customers, I mean, the users actually might not know about it. This is actually something we want to abstract anyway. I mean, the user shouldn't, in OpenShift world, in Ref you care, but in OpenShift world, you don't really care about nodes too much. And if we want to keep that, then basically the cluster, the OpenShift cluster sysadmin would know what the baseline CPU model is. So he would configure the whole OpenShift that way. With namespaces, you wouldn't get that.
Yeah, so the biggest drawback to me is also what you said, is that it's up to the user to create that default per namespace. So we would expect that users doing that upfront in order to have live migratable VMs or to have
Yeah, but that would mean the user needs to know about the nodes, but he should be abstracted from those.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about how much visibility he has about the nodes, but at least he would need to create it upfront in order to have consistency also going forward.
Yeah, but what I mean, you need to know the hardware configuration of every node in the cluster to make an educated decision about what baseline CPU model you want. Yeah, but to answer David's question, right now, I don't have, in my pipeline, there is no other request like that. So it's just this one, because it's the only thing that KubeVirt really cares about, and all the other stuff is not KubeVirt related.
Okay. I don't want us to blow it out of proportion if that's the case. Does anyone have any reservations about this being a config map option?
I'm fine with this one.
I think that's a path forward.
Okay, thanks guys.
Awesome, thank you. And next up, moving on to KubeVirt M Pro, Roman.
Yeah, so let me just repeat that I gave yesterday a short presentation about Pro and what it can do for us, and also added the link to the video into the community doc. Feel free to have another look. Reach out to me if you have further questions, and if there are no blocking concerns within the next days, I will just continue to migrate everything over, and will hopefully soon improve the overall experience regarding to running the tests and having successful tests. Anything else which someone wants to say to that topic? Great.
I really expected that to be a much more contentious issue. All right, great. Is there anything else that we need to cover in the agenda and notes section? All right, on the open floor, one thing to note is Daylight Savings Confusion Week is coming up. The United States moves to Daylight Savings on March 10th, which is, I think, 3 weeks before most European countries. This meeting follows the CET or CEST time zone, which is around central Germany, basically. So for the dates of the 13th, 20th, and 27th, this meeting will actually be at 11 a.m. For time zones within the US, or specifically Eastern time zone, but 1 hour later for US time zones in general. And are there any other notes we need to cover on the open floor? All right, well, thank you, everybody. And we will conclude this meeting and reconvene next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye bye.